I feel like you're attracted to Latinas and I'm attracted to Asian guys, so in one way or another, if it's meant to be.
Daisy Reyes is of Mexican descent. Rex Flores is Filipino. And together, they're raising Mila, their Mexipina daughter.
¿Gusto mo pa? ¿Quieres más?
Mila is part of a small but vibrant number of Mexipinos in the United States. Some of them are babies like Mila, others are performing artists, photographers, soccer players, and even mayors.
I know I was the first Mexican Filipina to be elected.
Why are there so many Mexican Filipino families in the US? How do the two cultures converge and clash? And what popular food is a result of this cultural fusion?
My name is Fernando Hurtado. I'm a journalist, and this story is about the hyphen between Mexicans and Filipinos.
Isa, dalawa, tatlo.
So the reason I started working on this story is because a few months ago, I did another story on the growing population of AAPI Latinos. AAPI stands for Asian American and Pacific Islander.
For the last 2 decades, the AAPI Latino population in the United States has actually been growing at a faster rate than the overall Latino population. That's according to an analysis of population data compiled by the USA Latino Policy and Politics Institute and the AAPI Civic Engagement Fund released in 2024.
I'll link to the video here, but one thing that stood out to me while I worked on that story was something one of the authors and researchers of the data brief from UCLA said.
Anecdotally, since I do research, more qualitative research, so interviews with AAPI Latinos, I'm seeing that there's a lot of like Mexican and Filipino mixtures.
And sure enough, when I posted that video, I got a lot of comments like this.
So I knew I had to do a story on this. I wanted to see how these cultures come together and where they diverge. So I went to the home of a Mexipino couple in Southern California and the office of the first Mexipina mayor of West Covina, a city about 20 miles east of Los Angeles.
Vamos a comer, we're gonna eat. Hola.
Daisy Reyes and Rex Flores live in Southern California, where they both grew up, with their almost 1-year-old daughter.
I grew up around a lot of Latinas, and yeah, I tried to learn Spanish so that I could talk to them.
I'm dead.
While they are both US born, they are also very in touch with their parents' cultures. I asked them what aspects of their Filipino and Mexican cultures work well.
Filipinos, they don't play about family for sure. Like Mexicans don't either, and that's I think where the fusion comes in so beautifully to me, because it's like his family, like I love to see it. Like they're always over together. Like my family, we're always together, and like they're always together, and like they're doing karaoke nights, and my family likes to do karaoke nights. But Filipinos, they don't play about the karaoke. They can do that from the sun up to the sun down.
Now there is one big similarity that's also a big difference. Some Tagalog vocabulary, what Rex's family speaks, is derived from Spanish. For example,
the Spanish word for spoon is cuchara. The Tagalog word is cutsara. But there are also differences, big ones.
You actually told me. He was like, do you know what means? And I was like, what? Oh, he was like, you want some? And I was like, what are you talking about? He was like, you want some? And I was like, what do you, like, you know that's a curse word, right? And he was like, no, it's a dessert, a Filipino dessert. And I'm like, what the heck? So I think it's so funny because I'm like, how do I tell my daughter that she can say to Filipinos, but she can't say to Hispanics? Like, how am I gonna,
like if it's your...
Yeah, so like, yeah. My mom's here.
Now, of course, not every Mexican family is the same, nor is every Filipino family, so it's no surprise that both Daisy and Rex have found small differences between their two cultures.
We put the ketchup and stuff in the fridge, and he was like, you don't put that in the fridge, you put it in the cabinet. Or like the bread, he puts the bread in the fridge, and I'm like, and also like, you know, I another thing, I grew up like with loud noises. I'm like, I just love like loud stuff. Like I love loud music. So like we're watching TV or something, like it'll be like skyrocketing. And he was like, damn, he was like, are you deaf? He's like, you don't need to put it that high. And I'm like, I'm used to like the loudness and stuff like that.
Hi. Hello. So we're just gonna quickly film.
Over in West Covina, I met Leti Lopez Viado, who was elected councilwoman in 2018 and became the city's first Mexipina mayor in 2020.
How many women? I never really counted how many women we have. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm the fifth woman.
She's currently mayor pro tem.
Unfortunately, when I'm with the Filipinos, they look at me and they don't think I'm Filipino enough. And then when I'm with the Mexicans, they don't think I'm Mexican enough. So I do get that asked a lot of times, not just by them, but by anybody else I meet out on the streets, residents, public. They've always asked that question because they can't tell.
She's the daughter of a Mexican father and a Filipina mother.
My father passed away when I was 5 years old with cancer, leukemia. And that being said, I lost the Hispanic culture a bit. I was primarily with my mom, who's Filipina.
But because she spent a lot of her childhood in El Monte, a predominantly Latino city in Los Angeles County, she was able to connect to that side of her heritage.
And we do a variety of things. We still participate in quinceañeras or debut, both cultures. The food, they cook, they love to cook. The hospitality is all there. And so growing up, I was around all that.
There is no data on how many Mexipinos there are in the United States. A report from UCLA found the AAPI Latino population overall in the US has more than doubled since 2000. Mexipinos make up part of that growth, but there aren't numbers of what share of that they're responsible for. What we do know is that Mexipino marriages have been happening for a long time.
This mixing had been going on for so many generations.
Dr. Rudy Guevara Jr. is a professor at Arizona State University and author of Becoming Mexipino, Multi-Ethnic Identities and Communities in San Diego. Guevara is a fourth-generation Mexipino himself.
My great-grandfather Filipino, my great-grandmother Mexican. And this is on my father's side. And then they marry, that's my grandmother. She's Mexipina, she marries Filipino. That's my father, he marries my mother, that's Mexican, and that's me.
Mexipino marriages go as far back as the 1500s to the Acapulco-Manila galleon trade route, which linked the Philippines and Mexico, when both countries were under Spanish rule. The route was used to transport goods as well as enslaved people to and from the Philippines.
You know, in these Spanish galleons, many of them were jumping ship and deserting because of the way they were treated, and then they were blending into the other mixed race and indigenous populations in the opposite countries.
I want to take a brief pause to tell you something. My name is Fernando Hurtado, and I'm a journalist with more than 8 years of experience. I recently left my job at NBC and Telemundo to launch this channel, In The Hyphen, to tell deeply researched, visually rich stories about US Latinos, and I could really use your help. Please subscribe and hit the little notification bell button so you don't miss the next video. And if you want to go a step further and support my journalism, you can join me on Patreon. There you get early access to videos, the ability to contribute to stories, and you even get access to my Build Out Loud podcast, where I basically peel back the curtain on the business side of In The Hyphen and talk numbers, including, yes, money. The link to all of that is in the description. Thank you so much for watching. Now let's go back to the video.
The Acapulco-Manila galleon trade lasted more than 250 years, which resulted in what Guevara calls Filipinized Mexicans and Mexicanized Filipinos. To this day, you see Filipino influence in coastal Mexican states like Colima.
What is a very traditional beverage for us that we call tuba is an inheritance that we have from the Filipinos. They arrived here to the Colima area, and they were the ones who taught us how to get the sap of the coconut tree.
The galleon trade also introduced indigenous Mexicans to citrus fruits, which in turn introduced them to ceviche.
The marinating of fish and shrimp and seafood, and seafood in general, and lime or citrus fruits. And that's something that Filipinos were doing, long before.
But it wasn't until the early 1900s that we started seeing the mention of Mexican and Filipino marriages in the United States. And a lot of this growth took place in San Diego specifically. There was an increase in Mexican migrants due to two events. After the Mexican Revolution, a lot of Mexicans moved up north to the United States to escape the country's economic and social instability. At the same time, World War I was unfolding, which meant a lot of American men had left to fight in the war, and the US had a labor shortage. To fill those jobs, the US government opened up immigration from Mexico.
Something else was happening around that time in the Philippines. Following the Spanish-American War, the Philippines became a U.S. territory. This made Filipinos U.S. nationals, but not citizens.
They could travel freely within the confines of, you know, the U.S. empire, so to speak, and sort of wherever they were at. But, you know, but at the same time, they weren't really protected.
While that was unfolding, there was a lot of anti-Asian sentiment brewing in the United States.
Guevara writes that this came to a head with two immigration acts in 1917 and 1924, which he says signaled the end of Chinese, Japanese, Indian, and other Asian immigration to California. Filipinos, however, were exempt from that policy. Even though they were from the Asian continent, Filipinos had U.S. national status. As a result, the U.S. government turned to Mexicans and Filipinos to fill the jobs left by Chinese, Japanese, and Indian workers. This, coupled with the fact that San Diego was being developed into the largest naval station on the West Coast at the time, meant there was a big need for laborers in San Diego specifically.
And this is where it gets interesting. Filipinos and Mexicans were working in a lot of the same spaces, so it's no surprise that some of them would date and get married. But there was something that made that much more likely to happen.
There was a big gender imbalance in the Filipino communities coming to the United States.
Early laborers that were coming in the early 20th century were predominantly men. And so you had, you know, the discrepancy could be anywhere from 1 to 20 to 1 to 40 or 50, you know, one woman to every 50 guys, you know.
The Mexican population was far more gender balanced, which gave Filipino men more options.
Because there was a lack of Filipinas, the obvious and most logical choice was Mexican and other Latino women because of those cultural familiarities that they had.
And there was another reason you saw a lot of Mexipino couples prop up at this time.
Filipino men couldn't technically marry light-skinned women. While some Mexican women were light-skinned, some Mexipino couples could get around this if they were both darker skinned because of Mexico and the Philippines' shared history as Spanish colonies.
They didn't have to deal with that if they were with Mexican women, you know, because you're having, you know, again, two brown individuals coming in with Spanish surnames, and, you know, these county clerks, they're not going to know the difference between a De La Cruz and a Garcia and who's Mexican, who's Filipino.
Fast forward to the 1960s, and we saw Mexican and Filipino farm workers banding together for better working conditions. The United Farm Workers Union was actually the result of separate Filipino and Mexican-American farm workers unions coming together for historic strikes. Today, in the modern-day United States, how Mexipino couples come together has little to do with wartime labor immigration. Leti Lopez Viado's parents ended up in the same circles through happenstance.
My uncle is Filipino, his wife is Mexican, and she worked at a sewing seamstress in LA, and my dad worked there. So I do have photos of like beautiful dresses that he made. And so they worked, and she was the one who introduced to my mom. My mom was a caregiver, nanny, you know, care for the elderly or takes care of the kids. And so they met, they married, you know, she was a house mom, and that's how they got together.
There are now things like Mexipino restaurants, a Mexipino food fest, and a Mexipino podcast, as well as a new generation of Mexipino babies being born.
I put on Jeepney School or Miss Valles. She's a Spanish version of Miss Rachel, and Jeepney School is like the Filipino version of Miss Rachel. So like just doing things like to incorporate into her daily life, just so like she can start getting accustomed and starting to understand everything, and for me to start understanding Tagalog. But like the way that we go about that, just when she's eating or she's doing something, like if she does something that I'm proud of her, I'm like, Magaling! I like clap for her, and she knows that that means very good, like in English, and in Tagalog, and I say muy bueno in Spanish as well. And when I say that, like she starts getting all happy and she claps because she knows that like she's doing good. You're so cute.
Thank you for watching this video. If you liked it, you might also like this other video I made.